We'll get started in just about 1 minute. Good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. We're down to the last hour here on the trade show floor at Medica in Dusseldorf, Germany. So we're taking this opportunity to record this week's show. We've got all the local and regional and national events, as well as some FDA news items that we want to tell you about. After that, we're going to show you the interviews that we did at the MedHealth Summit on November 1st with Mark Ignash from MEDC and with Diane Bouis from MedTech Innovator. A really dynamic time there, and we're excited to share it with you. But first of all, the news that we'll be covering today, FDA is talking about modeling and simulation. It's a really important part of the development process for medical technologies. But what are its limits? We'll be hearing about that. And a word also about FDA's new medical device cybersecurity playbook. They are trying to link not only hospitals and device developers, but also regions together to talk and think about cybersecurity and to be prepared for negative events. But first, upcoming events in the local and national ecosystem. November 23rd, right in Ann Arbor, Tech Homecoming by Ann Arbor Spark. They had the great idea to bring those together who are coming back for Thanksgiving. It's really a job fair. We're planning on being there, and we hope you will join us at Ann Arbor Spark the 23rd of November. Then on December 6th, the FDA announces their Broad Agency Announcement Day. This is a time to find out when the FDA's priorities, what the FDA's priorities are, and how you can participate if you're interested in advancing regulatory technology. Also on December 6th in Massachusetts, Waltham, Massachusetts, an in-person event with Jeff Shuren, who's the head of CDRH, Center for Devices and Radiological Health, put on by Mass Medic as a part of their regulatory roundup. On December 5th through 7th, the Digital Transformation Symposium, FDA's Office of Digital Transformation, and they're talking about how to leverage advances in data, cloud, user experience, cybersecurity, IT governance, and other things. They're going to have a Lamborghini race car driver there, and if that doesn't seem to relate, they're talking about the use of real-time data, giving a fun example of a place where that's used in the racing industry, but where they hope to be able to leverage those things in the medical technology industries. Scan the QR code to be connected to that event. And then on December 7th through 8th, this one is near and dear to my heart, Clinical Investigator Training course that the FDA is holding. So many in academia know how to write a clinical trial, but they don't know how to write it for FDA clearance. They know how to write it to be able to write a paper on it later. This is really important for anyone engaged in early stage development, thinking of conducting a clinical trial. Do your investigators understand these things? The topics covered there. It's a great one to tune into. And then on December 8th of this year, over in Schoolcraft, Michigan, C2DX, they were here at the show at Medica. They are going to be hosting the next installment of the MishBio BioMixer on December 8th from 5 to 7 p.m. Join them there. We'll look forward to seeing you there. January 16th of 2023. The FDA is holding a deadline, applications due for their Innovation Award, COVID-19 and Health Equity. the areas of interest that they're looking at, proposals that will contribute to the understanding of COVID-19 and long COVID for racial and ethnic minority populations, or contribute to the continued evaluation of safety and efficacy of FDA-approved products. It's well known that even things as different as skin color can make a huge difference in how medical devices behave, and FDA is shining a spotlight on this and saying, hey, let's look at some of these populations and try to make sure they're included in our analysis. Applications are due for that by January 16th. January 23rd and 24th, the Social Determinants of Health Summit at the Marriott in San Diego, January 23rd and 24th. And back to Michigan, the Biomedical Innovation Series put on by the University of Michigan. They're going to be covering a number of topics, intro to research commercialization, all the way through drugs, diagnostics, digital health, biomedical device development, and so on. Scan the QR code to get connected. And our friend Robin Rowe wanted to remind us that the 2023 AI Summit is happening next November 14th through 16th of 2023. A great show this year, just passed, and happening next year as well. Which brings us to FDA and industry news. Two news items today from the FDA, modeling and simulation, as well as FDA's new medical cybersecurity playbook. And this report entitled Successes and Opportunities in Modeling and Simulation for FDA, if you'd like to access a copy, you can scan the QR code right there. It starts with this. We're all familiar with in vivo testing, animal or clinical testing, which is often an important part of what you do to get your device cleared with FDA. Interestingly enough, at the trade show we're at here in Dusseldorf, Germany, Medica, along with our friends from the MEDC, the word on the street today is just how disappointed people are with the MDR, the new medical device regulation in Europe. Part of the reason that it's so daunting is because clinical data or in vivo data is required for all medical device applications, raising a very, very high bar. FDA, on the other hand, is actually pressing in the other direction, asking, well, if in vivo data is necessary, so be it. But of course, in vitro data is required, benchtop data is required. But they're now starting to ask the question more and more, when can modeling, they call it in silico, be used? Computational modeling to be able to identify whether something's going to work or not. It's a really interesting push. They've thought about this in a few different areas. Pre-market product review. Where will we either require or accept in silico modeling for pre-market product review? Post-market product assessment, policy development, or policy implementation. And they've done this analysis. Now, the analysis is much more in the report than we can cover right here in a moment. But I want to show you one table. This table is absolutely fascinating. And it's a little hard to see here, but if you go to the QR code we just showed you, you'll be able to access it and a lot of case studies from the agency. This is showing places where the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, Center for Devices and Radiological Health, and more are using modeling in their processes for pre-market, post-market, policy development, and policy implementation. And what you'll find is that different divisions are using them in very different ways. Now, some things that won't come as a surprise, for example, that CDRH is using modeling to study solid mechanics, fluid dynamics, heat transfer, acoustics, optics, ionizing radiation, mass transport. These sorts of things are what you would expect modeling to be used for. You would expect to see them as part of a 510K or a de novo, and they're a common part of the process. But if we look at something like this, benefit risk assessment, we'll find that some divisions use it for that and most don't. So for example, CBER, as shown over here, does use modeling for benefit risk assessment, but none of the other divisions to date have started adopting that. So it's quite a smorgasbord of who accepts modeling and for what. Now, of course, on the device side, The goal, the desire is to be able to use modeling more and more. And as the FDA says, initiatives are underway to fully harness computational modeling throughout the total device product lifecycle. And this is an example of that on the screen here. You'd like to use modeling over here during prototyping for design optimization. You'd like to use it over here during the regulatory decision. But they say this, quote, to realize these efforts, the credibility of computer model predictions must be established. Yet open questions remain. How much validation? How good is good enough? The lack of guidance for answering these questions has prohibited broader adoption of modeling and simulation in medical products. Now, we've experienced this firsthand in our own company going to FDA. FDA says, we want to see some modeling and simulation. Great, you bring something to them. And the next question is, how well is this model validated? And when you explain to the agency that there's no good way to validate the model, well, they don't ask for it anymore. But there is this interest, and yet validation continues to be the hurdle. To that end, FDA actually worked with ASME, the standards organization, and in 2018, after about a 7-year process, ASME published the V&V 40 standard, which you can get to through that link, which talks about how to validate computational models in this domain. So it's a really fascinating area. It's fraught with setbacks. One doesn't presume that you can just get a model and have FDA accept it. But it's worth knowing that the agency is interested. They're always interested to hear about models that you may have. In fact, that can be the subject of things like informational meetings with the agency. It's always good to reach out to them and let them know if you think there's something cool like that that can be done. Next up, a hot topic, medical device cybersecurity. FDA and MITRE just published the 2nd edition of the Playbook, the Regional Incident Preparedness and Response Playbook. After things like a ransomware attack called the WannaCry ransomware attack in 2017, FDA asked MITRE to develop the first version of this playbook, which was published in 2018. 4 years later, we have an update. Turns out that up to 82% of healthcare systems have reported a cyber incident, 34% of which involved ransomware cybersecurity issues. Get this, that impact the functionality of a device. That's the target here. We're not just concerned with cybersecurity in general, but cybersecurity where it impacts the functionality of a device. And of course, that needs to be part of the risk analysis during the development of any medical device. But this is asking now more a regional and local question. How should regions and how should hospital systems respond when something like this happens and be prepared to respond knowing that things like this are going to happen with increasing regularity? A deep dive on this is beyond the scope of what we're going to cover today, but I do want you to know about this document, this playbook, and for all of our friends and partners who are involved in regional healthcare, especially in the Michigan arena, we think this is a really important document to know about, and we commend it to your reading. Well, on November 1st, we were at the MedHealth Summit in Detroit, Michigan at Ford Field, and we got to catch up with quite a few folks for some one-on-one interviews. The first one we're going to show you today is with Mark Ignash from MEDC. We sat down to discuss many of MEDC's efforts, as well as we talked about the trade mission that we're on today here in Dusseldorf, Germany. Enjoy this interview with Mark Ignash. Hi, this is Gene Paranak, host of MedTech Crossroads, and we are here in Detroit, Michigan at the MedHealth Summit at Ford Field. And I am joined here by Mark Ignash, who is the Sector Development Director for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, MEDC. And Mark, we've been getting to know each other over the last couple of years. Thanks for being here, and thanks for sitting down to talk for a few minutes.
Absolutely.
So here we are in the Motor City, this place where all of Michigan's amazing industry has sort of been born and come out of. And a mutual friend of ours loves to say, in Michigan, we can build anything here. And I, over my career, have become convinced of that. It's often over the past decades it's been maybe a little more hidden, or it's been thought of as it's just this one thing, but there's so many industries that we touch and do touch today as a state and our industrial sector. Tell us a little bit about how you view that and some of the initiatives that MEDC is making to try to get the word out there.
Absolutely, and I appreciate kind of, it's interesting, we are in the birthplace of where the world was put on wheels, and out of that, spurred so much other opportunities for growth in different industries that our companies can potentially tap into. And so, while we find ourselves here in the Motor City capital, as you mentioned, we're talking specifically today about, healthcare, medtech, and technologies that are fueling the future of how healthcare is provided. And Michigan really is completely a player in that market, and that's one of the things that within our strategy, we're trying to make sure that we tell the world,
get the word out there. Well, it's something that you guys have been doing a lot I know in recent years, and I've even seen just over this last year, I've watched as you've been taking these delegations places. We were out in Anaheim. And just getting the word out about these Michigan companies. Tell us a little bit about the initiative behind that. Like, how did this come about?
Yeah, so, internally, it's one of those things that, I refer to it as a full court press effort, right? So, we're looking at it, and if we're going to go in market, meaning we're going to go somewhere else, whether it's domestically or it's internationally, it's how do we take the team we need to take to really best present our state. And that could be for any sector. And so specifically, in life sciences and medical devices and in healthcare technologies, one way that we can do that accomplishes several objectives is, you assemble a core of companies and you actually bring Michigan to those markets, whether that's somewhere else within the United States or that's globally. And it's actually very exciting to show up in places where sometimes they may not expect to see you, but then you really show, we've brought really our all-star team. And that's not just, MEDC's team, that's Team Michigan. And what we define by Team Michigan is any company that's a Michigan company, that's Team Michigan. That's our supply chain. Those are our manufacturers. Those are our pharmaceutical developers and our biotech innovators. That's Team Michigan, and that's where we said, how do we take all of that and how do we package that and display it for really the world to see? And that's been through some of these different delegations and events that we literally build the team and take that team in market.
Yeah, I think it's really cool because I remember when we were in Anaheim, you would have people say, "Oh yeah, Michigan's here," like Michigan showed up, and it's I think that sense of they're from Michigan and they're from Michigan and they're from Michigan. This whole state is here. I remember one time we were talking in our own business about like how many different roles it takes to do development of medical technologies, and people will sometimes think, "Oh, I just need this one thing and then I'll be done." It's so much that goes into it. And so many of those vendors that can play in multiple industries but are playing in medtech, they showed up to events like that. So I think it's so cool that you're highlighting those because there's so many little heavy lifts that need to be done all the way through that process. And those players were there. Well, and this isn't the end of it. There's another one coming up you were just at AdvaMed, the MedTech conference in Boston, representing Michigan. Any highlights from that, or how did that go?
Yeah, again, that event in particular, it really brought really deep intelligence and information based on what's the most recent developments, both in regulation, advanced manufacturing, where are we going with 3D printing and medical devices, and what are the constraints for medical robotics and cybersecurity. And these are all topics that, we're not there yet, but that's where we're going. And so as a state and through our participation in the event, we're trying to figure out where is it going, and what are the experts saying, and how do we try to position Michigan to be there? Yeah. Again, skate where that puck is going. And so I would say, by and large, it went great. I mean, definitely came back with knowledge and intelligence that we didn't have going in, and new contacts and relationships that, again, as a state, we can leverage to help inform where do we look at in the next 5-10 years when we do get there, when AI does get developed well enough to make surgical robotics even more prevalent, or 3D printing with the advanced polymers and materials becomes more widely applicable and usable in practice. That's where we're going. That's what we're told. We're going by the experts. So again, that event helps us to understand, okay, so how do we start to position now to be there when we need to be? And in some cases, we're there now already.
Yeah, those resources are there, and it's just a matter of knowing where they're needed and being able to
Yes,
highlight that,
absolutely.
which is what's happening so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. Well, and then 2 weeks from now, some of us are going to be in Germany.
Yeah.
Tell us about what's happening there.
Yes, so really as a component of our efforts to, again, get in market and as I say, plant Michigan's flag, firmly in places where we need to be shown and known. In partnership with the International Trade Team, we're deploying a delegation out to MEDC, which is, it's probably, if not one of the largest medical trade shows up there, along with the likes of Arab Health and a few others. But for the European market, it is the show, and upwards north of 16 different exhibit halls that honestly you got to spend probably a day in each. So yeah, we'll have a pavilion there. We're going to have companies joining us, helping them to increase their exports and build those international relationships. And again, lowering that barrier to entry. In some cases where they've got the know-how, they've got the solutions. It's just getting it into market. And we have wraparound services. We have folks that can help them connect with the right folks, the right meetings. And then we're also there on a business attraction effort. We're looking for companies that are saying we want to enter the U.S. market. And of course, we want to tell them, well, you need to consider Michigan. So let's talk about that as well. So yeah, it's a multifaceted trip, but ultimately, us as a state and as an industry and as those joining us saying, Michigan is a place that, we need to be considered. You need to look here, and we're glad to have you, come on over and take a look at what we got.
Well, it's so cool too, because it's not just flash and whatever else. It's really getting down into the weeds of what is necessary to make these kind of things happen, and showcasing those companies. And,
right.
And really, you guys are doing the legwork, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, well, hey, we appreciate doing it. It's what we do. We enjoy doing it, and anything we can do that helps our industrial base and our companies access new opportunities. I mean, that's the name of the game. That's the point of what we're doing, and it can be a long-term lead time on some of these relationships, but they've got to start somewhere, and we're here to help make that happen.
Well, thank you for all you do, Mark. Mark Ignash, MEDC. Thanks for being with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And finally today, our interview with Diane Bouis of MedTech Innovator. Diane and I have known each other for years. She's now helping on a grand arena with MedTech Innovator. And we sat down to discuss their initiatives and how she's staying involved in the Michigan ecosystem. Enjoy this interview with Diane. Here at the MedHealth Summit at Ford Field in Detroit, Michigan, and I'm here with the inimitable Diane Bouis of MedTech Innovator. Thanks for being here, Diane.
Hello, excited to be here.
I have to throw Diane under this bus, which is, I think of all the people that I know in our ecosystem, you introduced me to at least half of them. I mean, this is one of the greatest communicators and connectors that I know, and you're doing that now in a new position with MedTech Innovator, still here at this great networking event, part of the community, part of the ecosystem. But tell us a little bit about MedTech Innovator, what the group does, and also about your role with them.
I'm first going to throw that right back at you and say, power networkers among themselves. I think it's really important to connect our ecosystem, and that's why you are here and why I'm here. But let me tell you about MedTech Innovator. I am 6 months into the job, so I'm still pretty new. I'm still drinking from the fire hose. MedTech Innovator is the largest accelerator in MedTech in the world, which is quite impressive. As I said, I'm still enamored. I'm new. And really, they've been around for 10 years. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary. And that means lots of products in market, which in MedTech is not trivial. Yeah. So 190 products in market, about $6 billion in follow-on funding. Wow. 1 in 4 companies in MedTech fundraising at this moment in time this year are MTI alumni. So really a force to be reckoned with in the industry. And Paul Grand, our CEO, who started this, spun this out 10 years ago out of RCT Ventures, is very well known and very respected in the industry, and that really allows us as a team to open many doors for the startups that we work with.
That's really cool. Tell us more about the model there. So you're incubating these at some level, advising them. There's more services, there's a whole bunch of things that kind of come around in that ecosystem there.
What I personally really appreciate about the model is that we work very closely with a set of really top name brand recognizable strategic partners. So the Johnson & Johnsons and Becton Dickinsons and Olympuses of the world that are deeply involved in recruiting the startups. So because we've been very successful, we get a lot of applications. We get about 1,200 applications per year, and we only have slots for 50 companies. And our partners get deeply involved in the selection process of these companies, and they also get deeply involved in the mentoring of these companies. And it is that mentorship, I think, that money doesn't buy you. But practically, the program itself runs from June through October. So it's a 4-month program. It is a mostly virtual program, bookended by in-person events.
Oh, that's
so
great.
we meet at big conferences. We do our own events at the sidelines of big conferences. And that's when we do our own content, we do our matchmaking and things like that. But it also gives us an opportunity to put our startups on stage as opinion leaders in their respective area of expertise. So you don't just get to have a press release, yay, we made it into this fantastic and very selective accelerator program. We also were on stage at this important conference. So, if I had to summarize it, I would say the value proposition is A, 10 years worth of network of alumni, B, really great strategic partnerships, and C, great relationships with conferences that get you in the spotlight.
In the spotlight, and if you've already got those strategic relationships with potential exit companies, I mean, not everyone's going to go there, but nevertheless, you've got those mentoring there, then you sort of know that where you are is a thought-leading place, so that when you go to those conferences, you're in a position to really shine. That's really cool. And you guys are doing, thanks for appearing here as well, you guys are doing webinars. I think it's really cool, though. You told me just a few minutes ago, your webinars have a public aspect and a private aspect to them, which is a perk for the companies that are actually part of your accelerator.
Absolutely. So during the 4 month of the program, we do weekly webinars with thought leaders just around the topics that every medtech startup should at some point encounter, be that reimbursement, be that regulatory, be that be that partnering with VCs or with corporate venture capital, different things that everyone at some point will encounter. But so that compendium of knowledge is on YouTube and is available. But the public version is, and that we live stream on YouTube, is an hour, and then we do another half an hour with our panelists that is Q&A just for the cohort. And sometimes, especially people in quite prominent positions, will not necessarily say something that could be considered controversial on something that will live on the internet, on YouTube, but are willing to go into a little bit more of a nuanced, or give you numbers, as in how much, when, how, give you slightly more in-depth advice in a family-only type setting. And that's really what it feels like. I think an accelerator cohort really feels like a family, as in we're among ourselves. Let's talk real, let's talk shop here.
Yeah, well, and it sort of shows the value of the content, because then they can now engage with it, which they're not going to just do in the public setting. So as you take these companies through, who should be reaching out to you? What are the kinds of companies or entities or individuals that you want to connect with as MedTech Innovator?
I would say any startup in MedTech, which I would define largely as medical devices and healthcare IT. And I would say not super early stage, not straight out of a tech transfer office or a napkin drawing. We're talking about companies with teams, often that have made their first steps, sometimes at Series Seed, Series A, and then even all the way to later stage, Series B, B, and C. So we split the 54 companies, for example, that we had in the 2022 cohort into, we call one the accelerator cohort. They get really mentored and get a lot of hands-on work with their mentors. And the showcase companies, those are later stage, really raising that Series B or C, sometimes in market in Europe or in Israel, for example, or in Canada, and really looking to get into the US market by way of getting on stage, getting noticed that way, and the opportunity to connect with some strategics.
Very cool. So not the very earliest stages, but you're still taking seed stage.
Absolutely. So
companies.
Early, but not earliest.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And in case of doubt, apply, because what I usually tell people, just like your resume is supposed to get you an interview, not necessarily immediately the job, so does the application ideally get you to a live pitching event. And we invite about 200 startups to one of our live pitching events, where we invite about 60 of our judges from our partners. And so the people you meet at the live pitching event, should you get invited, sometimes that event in and of itself, even if you don't end up part of the cohort, can be really helpful.
Yeah, we've heard from so many that just getting in front of people who are going to evaluate it, it's like, wow, that was one of the first major steps for me to be able to go through that. What's coming up in the coming months? What's next up on deck?
2 weeks from now, a lot of people are going to health. We're going to MedTech strategists. They're unfortunately at the same time. If I could split myself, I would, but I'm not going to. We'll have the finals of our value competition at MedTech strategists in San Francisco. So that's where we're going to be next. It's always an opportunity to also connect with the ecosystem, right? It's not just our startups, it's everybody else. And then most likely we'll have a reception at JP Morgan in January.
Awesome.
And then we're planning our events for those pitching sessions where we invite between 20 and 50 companies to meet some of our judges in person.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds like you guys are doing all sorts of amazing things, and I'm thankful you're here today. Just a word about the event we've just seen today.
MedHealth Summit has been amazing for the last couple of years. In my personal event calendar, I put it on the calendar as soon as the date is known, and I show up because really, when you look around, the people in this room are truly the biomedical ecosystem in our state and in Southern Ontario. And that's a force to be reckoned with, but it's also something that we as an ecosystem are still trying to grow. And so the connections, I can catch up with 50 people in one go, which otherwise would take 50 individual Zoom meetings. So running into you here, running into everybody else here, that's why I come here. Yeah,
well, and the fact that you're here means that all those other people got to run into like 50 other people, because that's who Diane Bouis is. She connects people. So thankful to have you here. So good to see you again in person, and all the best. We can't wait to hear about the next steps from MedTech Innovator.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you.
Well, that's it for MedTech Crossroads today. Thanks for joining us. Greetings from beautiful Dusseldorf, Germany, the Messe Nord, 17 halls of amazing stuff. We're going to bring you the videos from this week in some future shows. I think you'll enjoy those. Talk soon.